Sure, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a senior citizen up here at Jackson's Point.
Jackson's Point. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. If you want to see a UFO, there's one right in the sky right now.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
Where are you? Are you in your house?
No, sir. Well, I'm in the house now, but for the last hour, I've been standing out in the recreation field here, watching it through binoculars.
Well, what are you seeing, sir? Would you tell us?
An object that looks like a Christmas tree, a triangle with blue, red, and white lights flashing like a psychedelic nightclub. You've never seen one like it in your life. And I'm a believer in UFOs, but I have never seen one until tonight.
Now listen, excuse the question. You're not drinking, are you?
I certainly am not.
Okay.
I'm a teetotaler.
You're a teetotaler, eh?
Diabetic, as a matter of fact.
My goodness. You say you're a senior citizen. How old are you, sir?
Pardon?
How old are you?
65.
You're 65. Oh, you're still young. Would you mind giving us your name? You don't have to.
I wouldn't mind giving you my name, but there's going to be a lot of people stare at me in the morning, so I'd rather not.
No, I disagree with you.
Give your name, Joe.
I think that most people are inclined to agree. Because so many people, I've interviewed many myself.
My name is Joseph Scott.
Mr. Scott?
That's right.
Listen, Mr. Scott, I've just been informed that our investigator, with his nose to the task, has caught your remark, and I think he'd like to ask you some questions. I'm referring to Mr. Henry McKay, who is the metro area UFO investigator, who has spoken to many people like yourself who believe that they have seen this type of thing. Would you like to talk to him?
Sure would.
All right, just a moment. Mr. McKay, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can.
Have you heard this gentleman's comments?
Just briefly, the fact that he has been watching it through binoculars.
Yeah. Sir, Joe, I got your first name, Joe. What is your last name?
Scott.
Joe Scott? And you're a senior citizen living up at Jackson's Point, and you've told us that you've seen something through your binoculars outside, which you believe is an unidentified flying object. I'm going to turn you over to Mr. McKay and let him ask you a few questions about that, because he'll know better what to ask you than I would. Mr. McKay?
Right.
I believe Mr. Scott can hear you now. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Joe. Hello, Mr. McKay. Yes, I'm glad to hear your voice. Well, glad to meet you. Yes, could you just give me, I'll ask you some questions very briefly, and just give me some short answers.
Right.
What direction are you facing? South. At Jackson's Point, you're facing... I was looking south, yeah. Yes. And you watched it through binoculars. Pardon? You were watching the object through binoculars. Yes, I was. And how long is it still visible? I imagine if I went out there now, I could probably see it. All right. Could you estimate the altitude and the direction? South? Point. Yes. Down towards Toronto way. I don't say it's over Toronto, but it's down Toronto way. It could be a lot farther than that. Yes. Fairly well up in the sky. 45-degree angle approximately? Pardon? Would it be a 45-degree? About a 45-degree angle, yes. Yes. Yeah, that's where the binocs were pointing, yeah. Is there any sound associated with you? None whatsoever. All right, and through the naked eye, what does it look like? It looks like just a pulsing glow, like a faraway bunch of little lights that would be going through a fog. And through the binoculars, are any details noticeable? Then it assumes like a rectangle shape, like a Christmas tree, with a point to the top. And I'm not the only one that witnessed this. The superintendent of the lodge and watching. As a matter of fact, we put up quite a while before we seen this stationary one. We seen two heading, I would say, northwest, right over the top of the lake. And they were pulsing too.
They certainly were.
Is there any aircraft in the vicinity? Not to my knowledge. I wouldn't say these were aircraft in the terminal. I would say I've been associated with flying and so forth and whatnot. Now I can recognize a plane in the sky at night. All right, fine. Thank you very much. I think we'll turn the program back to Mr. Knight, and by now we should have many observers on this object. Well, I hope they're looking. Thanks very much for calling.
Mr. McKay, don't go away, eh? Mr. McKay?
Still here.
Don't go away. Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Let me thank you very much for contributing to our program tonight.
Thank you.
Okay? And we'll say goodbye to you for the time being.
Mr. Knight.
Yes.
May I interject? Would you tell Mr. McKay to plan a visit to Jackson's Point at some time?
Are you on the same phone line as Mr. Scott?
Yes.
I see you've taken over from Mr. Scott.
Yes, this is the superintendent.
Oh, Jack, then you have observed the same things that Mr. Scott has just described to us.
Yes.
I see. And do you go along with what he said?
I've been a ufologist for 15 years.
I see.
I would like to speak to Mr. McKay.
All right, you're there, are you, Henry?
Yes, I am.
Would you go ahead?
Hello, Mr. McKay. Hello. How long have you been a ufologist? Well, I'm not, that's not the part right now. We're more interested in this actual sighting. Yes, we are, Mr. McKay, aren't we? Yes. And, of course, we are interested, too, in your intellect in regards to these sightings and your comprehension of the totality of the analogy of ufology. That's true. Indeed. Let us judge ourselves carefully, Mr. McKay.
Jack, since that's Twan Knight again, since that's the only name we have for you, if you're going to go ahead and carry on this type of a discussion with Mr. McKay, I must step in and get your full name and address and so forth, since we have all that from Mr. McKay. Would you mind giving that to us?
I will get in touch with Mr. McKay in due future.
Well, you're on the air. Do you have any reason for not giving us your background, sir?
I have a very strong reason.
Oh, you have a strong reason. Well, it strikes me as very strange that you would, in a way, confront Mr. McKay with the statements you've just made without telling us who you are.
Okay.
I mean, you can't be just a voice in the night on CFGM.
Okay, my name is...
It's not Jack.
No.
I see. Do you doubt what Mr. McKay says or what's been quoted about him for some reason?
I underestimate his intellect.
You underestimate his intellect?
In regards to ufology, yes.
Uh-huh. You know very much about Mr. McKay?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Mr. McKay, do you know this man?
I doubt it.
You don't think you know him?
No, I don't think so.
Uh-huh. Well, Mr. B, the object of this program tonight is very much the object that Mr. McKay seems to have,
yes.
And that is to find out, to dig out knowledge on UFOs and make it available to other people, not to sway their belief in this necessarily, but just to get the facts in front of them so that they can draw their own conclusions. Is there anything wrong with that?
I agree with you, Ted.
Okay. Then we don't have any axe to grind.
I don't think so.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You too.
Okay. Mr. McKay, are you still there? All right. I wanted to get that straightened out because I'm just afraid Miss had taste, in the air, and I wanted to get that cleared, that he didn't have an axe to grind. Mr. McKay, I'm glad that you were able to join the program a little bit earlier than we expected. We've got an idea of the types of questions that you ask when you're trying to authenticate or disprove a reported UFO sighting.
Yes.
Would you tell us, sir, why you became interested in this subject? You've obviously put an awful lot of time and effort into it.
Well, my original interest began with the question of whether there actually were reports of UFOs or not. You could discount all the reports and find disfavor with pilots and people who reported these sightings. And the more I worked on it, I was more convinced that there's some truth to the matter. So I decided to investigate a few cases myself, and I'm fully now fully convinced that they are an actual fact.
You questioned this gentleman out at Jackson's Point about what he believes he's looking at out there tonight. Are you inclined to believe that what he saw was something authentic, something from, say, another solar system or something?
Oh, I wouldn't dare venture opinion on that, the amount of information that's available at the present time.
I'm glad to hear you say that. It speaks very highly for you as an investigator.
No, it's quite important that he observed it through naked eyes in the binoculars, and he has other witnesses. Now, due to the fact that it's being broadcast at the same time it's being observed, we should come up with other witnesses at various points.
That's right. If they really saw something, you would think that other people will call.
Yes.
Now, they may not be able to get onto our program tonight, Mr. McKay. Would you like to give us an address where they could write you and convey their sighting, the information on their sighting to you?
Yes, I would, but I'd like to emphasize the point that I'm not in a position to supply or provide information on UFOs or any literature available. I get numerous calls and letters requesting information, and I'm just not in a position.
You haven't revolved this into a commercial enterprise. That's what you're saying. With you, it's still just a matter of your own personal interest.
Yes.
In the whole subject.
I'm a member of a number of organizations. I just can't handle all the correspondence requesting information. I would like to receive all the available reports as long as they're well documented.
Well, suppose you tell us now, Mr. McKay, what you would do with that information.
Well, I would have to try to evaluate it further. I'm not primarily concerned with just lights, nocturnal lights in the sky, or daylight discs. I'm only interested in close approaches or landing sites where details can be noted.
How about photographs?
Yes, photographs, but they're quite expensive to determine whether they're hoaxes or not. And,
yes.
Again, it would be a considerable length of time before it was determined whether it was an actual fact or of an object or a hoax.
Could we assume, Mr. McKay, that if you felt there was something authentic in a given report or in a series of reports, that you would channel this on to other proper authorities? I mean, you say you belong to a number of organizations. Would this information be conveyed to them?
Yes, but I would suggest that the people who are completing reports for documentation regarding UFOs, that they make 3 copies. With as much detail as possible, as an example, animal reaction, electrical disturbances, things of this nature, names and addresses of witnesses. Retain 1 copy for themselves, send 1 to the National Research Council in Ottawa, and 1 to research organization or myself.
That's very good. All right, I'm sure we'll find out more about you as in the next 25 minutes or so, Mr. McKay. I'm thinking that we should get back to the call since our lines are jammed and give you the opportunity and the people calling the opportunity for a conversation on the subject. All right, and we'll be right back with this program on Phone Forum tonight. Okay, that's something about these comfort to your home that you could hear during Ken's commercial announcement there. I guess we're back to line 1, are we, Ian? CFGM, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, Ron. This is Jack again.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, you told me to go up and Jackson's Point or something. You cracked the loop?
No, the fellow from Jackson's Point identified himself as... John, for filling in for us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm at a loss to explain what has just happened on phone forum, really. For some reason, all of our lines were jammed, and we've had to clear all of the phone calls, so the people were holding on. Would you mind calling us up again, and we'll start over? I don't know. Maybe someone from Bell Telephone could someday figure out what actually happened there. But Ian and I went through our normal process, and yet you heard the sounds, the distortion that occurred on the program, and I must apologize to you for it. We'll get right back to our calls again in the hope that that won't happen again. We'll go to line 1. Phone forum, good evening.
Yes.
I'm sorry for that mix-up. Were you one of the people who was waiting?
Yeah, well, I just dialed it, and then they put me on hold.
Yeah, okay, maybe it's just that there are too many people dialing in at once to get on the program. But we're talking about UFOs, Ed. Do you have something to tell us?
Yeah, like, I never seen a UFO before.
Okay. Neither have I.
I was just wondering, hello?
Go ahead.
Oh. I was wondering, you know the radars that we have nowadays?
Radar?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, couldn't they, like, capture one? Like, detect one in midair?
Mr. McKay, are you still standing by? Mr. McKay, are you still there? I'm not getting Henry McKay in here on the conference line. Would you try to ring up Mr. McKay, Ian? And we'll try to get him back on the program. Okay, sir. Mr. McKay, we seem to have lost him in that uproar of telephone noises we had before. So I'm certainly not in a position to answer that. But I would think that, yes, it's quite possible that our Department of Defense, possibly even the Department of Government dealing with national communications, must have some evidence of something that has been picked up on their radar scopes.
I see. Because what I was wondering was that, you know, it's on the radio and there's nothing, you know, like in the paper or on television. And when you brought the subject up tonight about the UFO, it struck me, you see, and especially with this talk here at Jackson Point, you know, I wasn't too sure whether it was true or not. But
makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Are you inclined to believe that we're being visited from outer space?
For me?
Yeah, are you inclined to believe that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. You think that it's logical and possible?
Oh, yeah, it's right.
Yeah, that's my feeling exactly. I'm a bit of a Thomas. I like to put my finger in the wound, but on the other hand, it's hard to deny such a rush of reports from so many types of people on these UFO sightings. Listen, thanks for calling.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. Phone forum, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm calling to verify the sighting at Jackson's Point this evening.
You are?
Yes.
Are you calling from the same house?
No, I'm not.
I see. Where do you live?
I live Willow Beach, just a few miles from Jackson's Point.
And what have you seen?
I saw the same things this evening. There was 3 of them.
The same things. You saw 3 of these things?
Yeah.
Are they out there now?
No, they're not. This is earlier, about 8 o'clock.
Around 8 p.m. Would you describe one of these things?
When we stop.
Wait a minute. I'm informed that Mr. McKay is back. We'll let him do the questioning, okay?
Yes.
Just a moment, please. Hello, Henry.
Hello.
We have just found another person out in the Jackson's Point area to verify that earlier call. It's a lady at Willow Beach. Would you like to talk to her?
Yes, I would.
Well, go ahead, Henry.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Did you see the object yourself?
Yes, I did. I saw the 3 of them.
Could you describe the behaviors, please?
Pardon me?
Could you describe the action?
The first one, it went down towards Toronto and disappeared, and the other 2 were just hovering, like at a standstill. And when the first one disappeared, the second one followed. And when it disappeared, the third one did the same thing.
All travel in the same direction?
Yeah. And about 9:30, I saw another one go down the same way.
9:30 this evening?
Yeah.
Were you watching it through binoculars?
No, I didn't have any.
Any sound attached to this?
No.
Could you estimate the altitude?
No.
And in relation to where you're located, what angle would it be? Could you estimate the angle from your position? How high will it be in the sky?
No, I couldn't do it. Plane was up there, I couldn't.
Wouldn't be directly over your head?
No, they weren't. They were up.
To the west? Are you familiar with the...
They were down, like, going towards Toronto Way.
Yes, that would be south.
Yes.
Did you observe the objects first in a westerly direction or easterly?
Yeah.
In a westerly direction. What are the cloud conditions up there? Is it very...
No, there was no clouds. It was very clear.
Very clear up there, is it? Because I was just out and it's very cloudy. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for calling, eh?
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Mr. McKay, you hold on, will you?
Yes, I will.
I must apologize for that telephone mix-up earlier, Henry. I'm still at a loss to explain it. It just seemed that everything in the whole telephone system here jammed. We had to clear all the lines and start over in order to get back to where we were. Very mysterious. You'll stay there, will you?
Yes, I will.
Okay, we'll be right back with Phone Forum. Get back to Dave. Dave, what was it, November, about 4 years ago now, or was it 5?
1973.
1973. We're talking 5 years ago already. So that's 5 years and a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a show here, and we had conferenced in Henry McKay, the very well-known Toronto UFO investigator. And we had arranged for him to, well, no, we hadn't arranged. As a matter of fact, some folks called us from out of town who claimed to be watching a UFO at that very time.
That's right.
And we mentioned a certain name, as you relate in your book, and all of a sudden everything went screwy here on the air. We were knocked off the air. Our callers were knocked off the telephone lines. There was a very strange sound on the air at that time. And what were you doing? I know what I was doing. I was sitting here, and my hair was standing straight up. What were you doing?
Well, I was sitting in Oakville taping the show, because as a matter of fact, I was associated with Henry at the time in a UFO course that he was teaching in Toronto, and he mentioned that he was going to be on the show doing a phone-in thing, and I thought, well, we'll see what kind of calls we get about UFO sightings in the area recently, so I taped the show. And as a matter of fact, I didn't think too much of the noise, the interference at the time. I thought it was a technical malfunction. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later, when something else came up, I heard an interview with another UFO researcher in the area who mentioned that several Toronto UFO researchers have been having trouble with their telephones. In other words, their telephone calls concerning UFO research had been interrupted by some weird interference. He was being interviewed on a CBC radio show at the time, and he mentioned the fact that even a radio show concerning UFOs had been jammed. That was the word he used, and that triggered my memory. And I remembered the incident, and I said, darn it, I got a tape of that show. I'm going to play it again and see what happened, just to refresh my memory, and I played it. And then I decided to get hold of you and find out if you'd found any mechanical reason for that particular interference. And to tell the truth, I was really surprised that you hadn't. You know, I thought there would have been a natural explanation for that.
Well, to the extent that we investigated it, we were not able to find the reason for it, either from our own station engineer nor from the Bell Telephone Company.
Right.
So we really had no obvious explanation for it in any event.
Yeah.
But you went further than that.
Yeah, right. I got hold of an electronics expert, and he analyzed the signal from the tape, and his conclusions were that in order to create such an interference on your show, some electromagnetic source with a power at least twice the power with which you were transmitting would have to be responsible for jamming you off the air. And that would mean something in the neighborhood of 100,000 watts, which is pretty strong. And as you know, there's nothing around here with that capability. Now again, we're jumping to conclusions whether when we speculate that there was any relationship between this interference and the UFO that was being reported at the time. But nevertheless, the whole thing was more of an attention-getting device to grab my attention to the fact that Gerry Armstrong, the mention of Gerry Armstrong's name had apparently triggered this interference, and it caused me to get into the investigation of the events of the book.
As I recall, I didn't understand his name, and I was getting him to repeat it.
What actually happened, and this is fresh in my mind because I recently played the tape, was that he got into an altercation with Henry McKay on the show, and you made him reveal his name. You mentioned that you don't usually do that on a radio show, but since because of the tone of the conversation, you wanted to know his name, and he revealed it. And then a few minutes later, somebody else telephoned in and mentioned his name, and it was at the second mentioning of his name by somebody else that the interference started.
Yes, because Gerry Armstrong and I had words, because he was questioning the credibility of Henry.
It appeared that way.
That's the way it appeared to me. I'm pretty sensitive to those things. I don't allow badgering on the show.
Right.
And so immediately the hairs on the back of my neck went up. And I said, well, all right, I'll allow this to continue, providing you let us know who you are. You know who we are. Mm-hmm. Now let's make it fair game. Tell us who you are. And because of his profession at the time, he preferred to remain anonymous. But it was so important to him that he finally reluctantly revealed his name.
Right, yeah.
And that's when exactly. Whatever it was.
It scared the pants off Ian, I know that.
Well, and Ian can verify that up until that time on his show, there'd never been that type of interference at any time. And since that time, many of my other producers can verify it has never happened again, except about a year ago, when we brought you on the show again, and we played the tape of what had happened in 1973, and lo and behold, 15 minutes later, you could hear it coming again. A weird sound in our room, and it was coming, and we were talking, and you could hear it in the background coming, and we were all looking at one another. Wow, here it is again. And after we acknowledged it, it just gradually faded down and away. That was the end of it.